Hello and welcome to another instalment of the UK Column Live. It is Wednesday the 25th of July. The sun is shining, there's not a line in the sky, and we're all happy. Welcome, Brian.
Yes, well, good afternoon and thank you for joining us here in the Plymouth studio. It's been the Daily Telegraph that caught our eye from yesterday, which I brought in a slightly mucky copy. I'm sorry about that. But this is yesterday's Daily Telegraph, which I found absolutely fascinating. We've got a big article here where we're being told it's morally wrong to pay tradesmen cash in hand. We've got a big picture here of the, well, I'm going to say the Olympic flag. We've got gold medalist Sir Chris Hoy here with a flag for Team GB. Of course, what viewers should notice is that we've got the gold fringe around the flag. And what this is really telling us is this is to do with corporate interest. This is UK PLC. This is Admiralty law being waved in front of our faces. Of course, the team are there for the Olympics and we wish them well. But actually, they're being used to peddle a rather different message, and the key is this flag. So if you fancy researching that a bit yourself, please do. And then on the column nearest me, we've got a little comment from Tony Blair, a very important statesman, of course, who's talking about the bankers. So I know that you've had some interest in this cash business, Malcolm. What is it that you've picked up on?
Yes, I think it's interesting that basically the Telegraph is talking about the cash in hand fiasco, which basically is about people who pay for plumbers and other services, similar services, in cash. Because apparently it's morally wrong. I think it's interesting that when you look at the title, because it says Great Cash in Hand Fiasco, and I think they say fiasco because it's just come out, and it's in today's Telegraph, that various ministers, such as Cameron, Clegg and Cable, basically admit that they also pay their plumbers and electricians and various other services in cash. And if I can just quote from the article, it says, "The news came as parliamentary expenses files showed that at least 2 cabinet ministers had avoided paying VAT on goods and services for their second homes by paying in cash." Then goes further to talk about Mr. Hunt, who has been in the news quite a lot recently, and went on to say that the method that he used when he was paying for a plumber was cash, and that the tax rate section was left blank. So again, we've got a level of hypocrisy from our ministers, which I think is quite laughable in some instances, where it's okay for one, but it's not okay for the rest of us.
Well, that's certainly true, but I wonder whether perhaps there's something else going on here, which is that these articles are lining us up to actually try and get people to stop using cash altogether.
Oh, absolutely.
Because of course, the moment we don't have cash in our pockets, we are at the total we're under the total control of the banks.
Absolutely.
And we have mentioned on previous programs that people around the country were quite shocked to discover for the first time they could go to a hole in the wall to a cash machine and not get their money out. And of course, people at the people on lower wages, and this is a reality for them, they're used to being short of money. I'm not saying this is a good thing, it's a bad thing, but they know what it's like to go to the bank and the bank doesn't give them money. But this has come to a very big shock to people who are used to always having money in the bank and always being able to draw out what they need when they go shopping.
Yeah.
So I personally think that what we're starting to see here is this is behavioural control, this is nudging. And what the Daily Telegraph is trying to do, in my opinion, is to nudge us into the view that handling cash helps the criminal, and therefore they don't want us to be using thing. So I can see it maybe a slightly different spin with this headline in the paper today, the cash in hand fiasco, because by linking cash to politicians who've recently been embroiled in all of the expenses fiddling, to me there's a common theme, which is that we're making cash a dirty subject.
Yeah, and I think just on a subconscious level, when you look at the headline, you've got cash in hand and fiasco all in the same breath, you know. And at the same point, while while it's highlighting that that ministers are paying in cash and they're being hypocritical, it's not really backtracked on the statement that handling in cash is morally wrong. And I think when you like, as you just said, when you tie this in with a lot of the stuff that's coming through our newspapers, like recently, I think last month we had a story about Barclays who wanted to put chips in our phones so we could scan little funny kind of symbols on sort of train stations and bus stations, and we could therefore start paying without cash that way. We've got debit cards, which I think have been the beginning of the nudge, really, because it's a convenient way, isn't it? And convenience is always used to get people to do the things that a normal, sane person, if they could see the full facts of where they were heading, wouldn't do it.
Yeah. So we've also got the fact that checks are to be stopped completely.
Right.
There was a date, and I should know that off the top of my head, but I can't remember. But I know that's something which is now being pushed, that we're going to get rid of signed checks. And of course, the moment that happens, we're completely divorcing a real person with a connection with that money.
Right. Yeah.
So I mean, I think that where we're heading very quickly now is that they want us in a cashless society. And of course, what people need to understand is that the moment we're in that cashless society, each and every one of us is totally controlled by the bank, who can simply turn the switch, and we do not have access to our own money or credit if we should need it.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, the noose really is tightening, isn't it, when you look at it in that sense, because we've got a system really where a majority of people in this country are paid by PAYE. Now, in order to be paid by PAYE, you need some form of bank account. So again, I mean, I've been in debates with many people before. Why do we have banks or bank accounts when we know that by having a bank account, we're actively supporting some pretty terrible behaviour which goes on, trafficking various things like drugs and money and weapons. But I think we almost in a way get left where we have no choice, because we need to get paid, and in order to get paid, we have to have a bank account.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is just another nail that's being hammered into the coffin to get us to literally be in bed with banks that we can't get out of.
Absolutely. In fact, a little sideline to that is that a gentleman spoke to us this morning, and what he pointed out was that now if you come to get rental accommodation, what people are experiencing across the country is the fact that you're not only being asked for references, but you're now being asked to actually declare what your earnings are. So, for example, if you need to rent a property at £600 a month, you have to be able to show that you have an income of £20,000. So the landlords are being used to lever out of us yet more personal information, but also somebody somewhere is starting a policy movement that if you haven't got enough money, in their opinion, you can't even rent a property to house your family. Yeah. So this is where this control's coming in. It links in with this quite nicely. This is an article I've got in front of me on the screen from the Daily Mail. It made me smile, actually, although that's probably not the right thing to do. But the title of it was "How Rip-Off Banks Have Lost the Trust of the Public, and There's a Culture of Dishonesty and It Must Stop." And this was Lord Turner, who's been commenting as the Financial Services Authority Chief. And there's a little bullet point here at the top of this article, and it says, Lord Turner criticises the culture of the city, singling out dealers swigging champagne as they fiddled LIBOR rates.
Right.
Now, what interested me about this headline from the Mail, of course, is here is this wonderful expression, which is fiddling.
Yep.
And we know that at the moment we've got ordinary people who are being sentenced to prison because there's a 70-year-old lady who's recently been put in prison. She's refusing to pay her council tax because her local council isn't putting a stop to the prostitution and drugs and litter on the streets. But there are many people who can't pay. They're not treated as fiddling. You know, people who are actually short of money and they can't pay their bills, these are now criminals, and they're getting locked up. So it's very interesting that we have Lord Turner who's busy talking about this. I took a little look at the Financial Services Authority website, And one of their key statements is that, this is a quote from their site, "One of our statutory objectives is to reduce the extent to which it is possible for a financial business to be used for a purpose connected with financial crime." So Lord Turner has been head of the organisation which has ultimately been tasked with putting a stop to financial crime within financial services and banks and all the rest of it. And just so that we're totally clear as to what we're talking about, the site also defines financial crime, and it says that this is money laundering, fraud, dishonesty or market abuse, which of course is what the LIBOR is itself, and the abuse of those interest rates has therefore given rise to fraud. So the man who was tasked with controlling and rooting out crime, Lord Turner, has obviously singly failed in his job, which at the moment we're not seeing the mainstream press really get to grips with. But then if we go down in the article, if I can scroll down, I'll probably remember it anyway, but if we scroll down through the article, what we then find is that we've got Lord Green's name, and Lord Green, the Trade Minister, was of course the former chairman of HSBC, which has been exposed recently in laundering money, which I think some of it was connected with drugs.
I think quite a bit of it was connected with drugs.
So we're now in the position in Britain where the people who are embedded not only within the government with ministerial responsibility, but the people who are in the non-governmental organisations who are tasked with actually protecting us from criminal activity, they're clearly in bed together.
Yeah.
There's no separation here.
No.
And you know, you take a tin of something from the supermarket and you're going to be looking at a prison sentence, or for ex-Royal Marine Mike Harvey giving your son 2 chocolate Easter eggs and you're given an 8-week prison sentence. But when it comes to what is blatant criminal activity within the banking sector, we're suddenly back with Lord Turner talking about fiddling.
Yeah.
And to me, I think that certainly the view of the UK column team is that we've got to start actually calling these people what they are, which is criminals.
Yeah.
And if we start calling them what they are, we can then move down the path to dealing with them properly.
Yeah.
Have you got anything to come in on that?
Well,
otherwise I'm ready to go on the next.
Oh well, if you want to, I would simply say that it's just completely ironic that this gentleman has been put in place to investigate financial crime in a place. I mean, he's surrounded by financial crime, so yeah. I would hope that he would come up with something pretty meaty.
Well, you know, we could ask a key question: was this gentleman put in order to sort things out, or was he put in place because what is he, incompetent or turning a blind eye?
Yeah.
You know, we always assume
Absolutely.
that these individuals have our best interest in heart, but
yeah.
you know, but the reason for viewers, the reason that we were having a little bit of a laugh is, of course, the little headline on the Telegraph here was that hanging bankers won't help, and here we have Tony Blair, loved by many, of course. And what we should remember very clearly is he's an advisor to JP Morgan, one of the US investment banks, Zurich, Swiss financial firm, and he's now on an income of about £20 million. There are many people in the world and Britain today who think that Mr. Blair should be regarded as being a war criminal, but we'll leave that to the side. Mr. Blair is very concerned that people shouldn't be too angry about what the bankers are doing. Yep. And he's got a lovely little quote in here. He says, "We must not start thinking that society will be better off if we hang 20 bankers at the end of the street." And I find this very interesting because if we were very cynical, there may be people who think the number of bankers is insufficient. But the UK column has never promoted violence of any form. But I think many people would say, well, Mr. Blair, you're completely wrong, because we need to deal with bankers in an appropriate way.
Absolutely.
But I just find it insulting that a major paper like The Telegraph should think that the public in Britain want to pay any attention to anything Mr. Blair says. That's one point. And the second point is it that the banks are getting a little bit worried about what people are thinking? Is this why Tony Blair is now suggesting that, whoa, just hold back, we shouldn't do anything too nasty to the bankers? Maybe that's what he receives his £20 million for, which is to get out there and help protect and promote the bankers' interests.
Well, it's quite possible. It's also maybe part of some sort of agreement that led us into a war which has seen banks profit immensely from the rebuilding of Iraq and other countries that we see that are often torn apart by war. I mean, this is the thing that I think that the general public we've really got to wake up to, is that these purported crimes that we talk about, you know, whether they be wars, whether they be political, or whether they be judicial, they're all money related. They all take money to enact these crimes, so to speak. Yeah. So somewhere along the way, a bank will be involved in that. And as Lord Green will no doubtly know with HSBC, you know, banks seem very happy to afford that kind of service to people who don't have very acceptable careers. And I'm talking obviously about people who, you know, they profit off like drugs, or they profit off the sale of weapons, which will then go into war-torn countries such as, you know, Libya, or you know, and so forth. So
it's amazing stuff. Perhaps we should also just get in here on the subject of the Financial Services Authority. Of course, that they recently did post a comment on their site about the lawful bank. And it was quite interesting because the Financial Services Authority were not stating that the lawful bank had done anything untoward. They were simply saying that it wasn't approved by them. And the significance of this is the fact that at the moment people just believe that it's the international banking community that are the only people who can produce money. So we're in this bizarre situation where we've got private banks who are producing money, and then of course they're loaning it at interest, which the government is taking out of us with taxes. But we've also got the ability for the nation to produce its own money. And 8 miles or so down the road from the studio here, we've got Totnes, which has been running a Totnes pound quite happily, which has been accepted in local shops and businesses for many years. And the proof of this is that, of course, we can issue and use our own money clear of this highly corrupt international banking system. Yeah,
and let's not forget Iceland. I mean, you know, they're kind of leading the way really in this in this sort of I don't want to say fight, but this resistance against these ridiculous loans and you know, crippling national debt. I think you know, a lot more publicity needs to be given to what Iceland's doing and what the people have done.
Absolutely. We've got a few headlines about the Olympics. I don't know whether you've got some thoughts on the Olympics as well, because of course certainly the BBC has now started the great rundown for the next whatever it is, 3 weeks.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a little bit on the Daily Telegraph today about sponsors being told to stay out of the Olympic lanes, because I think there's some concern that people who shouldn't be using the lanes are going to kind of nip in there and use them. I'm astounded, actually. There's no news in it today, but I've been astounded recently about some of the bizarre requests, you know, such as you can't enter the Olympic Stadium with a logo on your T-shirt that's not part of the official sponsorship crowd. You can't buy chips, as in food chips, other than McDonald's fries, unless you're buying it with fish. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Instead of being a national event, it's become a corporate event.
Very much a corporate event, yeah.
And this is the main thing. And it occurred to me, maybe I should have thought about it before, but what I haven't seen in the papers, and I certainly haven't seen on the TV or heard in the radio, is any form of interviewing with people about what they thought about the Olympics. Right. In the run-up to the Olympics, there has been nothing from ordinary people. All we've seen is the hype from government ministers and Boris and Sebastian Coe pushing this lot forward. But you've never heard what ordinary people think about what's being done. and I wonder whether this comes in the suppression of anything bad.
Yeah.
Do not say anything bad about the Olympics.
Well, it's very possible. It's very possible. And if viewers or listeners do have any comments that they'd like to share with us, they can reach us on Twitter, which is the hashtag is #UK Column Live. We'd be very interested to hear people's thoughts.
Okay. Well, that's the main part from the newspapers. And we've got some other points that we'd like to share with viewers. Firstly is that we're going to thank you again for the very positive responses that we've been getting in. We're now getting a steady stream of emails from people who are saying that they're watching the shows, they're very interested in what we're doing. We're being asked if we can cover other subjects. So our intention is to broaden out. We're going to try and increase the amount of time that we can be on air with you, and we're also going to try and broaden out the number of topics that we're talking about. So one of the areas that we're looking at tackling at the moment is to do with agriculture, and you've kindly agreed to face this one up. Just tell us a little bit live. I know I'm catching you, I was going to say on the hoof here, which is the right thing to say, but just tell us a little bit about your own experiences with farming on the land.
Yeah, sure. Well, as you know, I have a little small holding of my own. We do keep animals on there. I live pretty much in the heart of a farming community. There's a good 4 or 5 farms that surround us where we are. And farming is it's a big topic at the moment, I think.
What's the feedback from the farming community?
Well, I think
how do they see things?
A lot of people are a bit confused at the moment because people have been paid to not work, and a lot of farmers they're farmers because it's their lifestyle. They were brought up as farmers from birth, and that's all they know, and it's all they enjoy. It's what they really love and they love doing. And there's a lot of confusion because obviously they're being subsidised to not produce, and they can't understand why in a time where food is becoming massively expensive and could be reduced if we had local farming and and more farmers markets. So there's that issue. I have a friend who's a milk farmer, and he's pretty much on his last legs. And again, he can't understand why it would appear that the ministers and the government of this country is trying to destroy or at least restrict our farming capabilities.
Well, we've had using the word destroy, but we are getting farmers contact us, and we know that in South Wales, as one example, very strong feeling now that you can call it red tape, but what the farmers are actually saying is that they're now experiencing it's coordinated, it's orchestrated, and clearly the objective is that we don't farm effectively, efficiently, and we're not producing the right type of foods. So one of the things that's prompted us to say, right, let's have a look at the farming industry is the type of comments we're getting in from people.
And regards to red tape, I know a lot of it is on the back of like some of the kind of like scandals that have come out recently, like the foot and mouth and the mad cows and so forth. The red tape is so restrictive. A friend of mine had to move some of his animals just recently, and he was literally moving them from field A to field B. And because he had to cross a road, even though it's all on his land, he had to cross a road to do it. The level of paperwork he had to fill out was unbelievable. Yeah. And it becomes ridiculous. And it seems another way in which government can get into the lives of people where it's problem, reaction, solution. The problem is animals have got sick. The reaction is we need tighter controls, and the solution is that the government then comes into farms, and they get to know particularly everything that goes on, what's being grown, what's being sold, and
instead of being able to get on with the jobs, they're spending more time pandering to the officials and the rules.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, there are deeper issues, and one of the things that we've actually been working quite hard on over the last few months, in fact. But there is some very, very interesting evidence coming to light over the foot and mouth issue. And it's extraordinary how people from different parts of the country who were clearly deeply disturbed by what they saw going on during the foot and mouth crisis have now been swapping information and putting bits of the jigsaw together. And what we're being told, and we will present evidence to viewers as it comes into us, but what we are now clearly being told is that the foot and mouth crisis was engineered. Now that is a pretty powerful statement, and you say, why was it engineered? And what the farming community are saying to us is that it was engineered in order to completely destroy and destabilise Britain's agricultural base. Now that is a pretty phenomenal claim by those people, and I think it's going to be very interesting to have a look at some of the evidence as it comes forward.
Yep.
But clearly the common theme has been that within the whole of the foot and mouth programme was, how do we best describe this? People were being put in conflict with each other.
Sure.
So we had two adjacent farms. The animals were killed on one farm but not the other farm. When it came to actually paying the compensation for the animals, a similar picture. One farmer gets the compensation but a neighbour doesn't. And of course what that started to do is create friction for people. Yeah. So I think there's some pretty interesting areas we can go into there.
Yeah, I think so. And let's just very quickly, I just add this. Let's not forget that in the early part of last century, we were pretty much self-sufficient in this country. Yeah. And and now 100 years later, we're not. We're completely insufficient. You know? And nothing's changed. The land is still there. The animals are still there. The seeds are still there. I don't think Monsanto's bought them all up yet. So it's just bizarre that all the environment is still there. It's all still the same, except that for some reason we can't produce the food.
Yeah, well, maybe if we put a positive spin on it, maybe we're at a good point now because we've got to the stage where people can actually see that what's been done. We could say since the Second World War, we certainly say over the last 30 years, if you analyse it, it's absolute madness that foodstuffs that are grown locally aren't being made available to people locally. We have to send animals huge distances to be slaughtered, which is additional suffering for those animals.
Well, it's unlawful to slaughter on site as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we've now got the business where, of course, the big supermarkets are controlling everything in their local area. And now we're also seeing the rise of the, what are they called, the metro-style supermarkets. So these are now taking out the little local corner shop. So the picture overall seems to be that our food is being controlled in the hands of fewer and fewer people.
And of a lesser quality, much lesser quality. When you consider that an animal today will be pumped full of antibiotics one way or another, either through the feed that they're eating or through the injections that they're given by the vets. As you've pointed out, they've had to travel long distances to be slaughtered, which is very tiring on the animal. And we might think, well, it doesn't really matter, but it does, because that level of fear that's pumping through that animal's body for the hours and most often days that they are traveling, sometimes weeks if they're coming from, say, Turkey or somewhere. It tenses the meat, and it really doesn't provide us with good, sufficient nutrition at all. Yeah. And and that's just with the animals. I mean, we could then go into, like crops and how they've been diminished, because of the fact that we're such intense farming that we never used to have 100 years ago, together with the pesticides that companies like Monsanto and Dow produce, which are stripping the land. I mean, our food is incredibly malnutritioned.
Okay, well, just looking at the clock, and we're on the half-hour point.
Right.
So I'm going to say to viewers, thank you very much for joining us again for UK Column Live. We'll be back with you tomorrow, and we'll also be looking to our future programmes where we're going to continue some of these broader issues. And I think maybe nutrition, aside from just agriculture, is maybe one of the areas we should go.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, so with the sun still shining, I'm going to say goodbye from the Plymouth studio. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Okay.